Okay, welcome everyone. This week, let's talk about two things that can make or break your fiction. We're going to talk a little bit about character and we're going to talk a little bit about dialogue. Let's start with characters. Now, these are obviously one of the most important components of any stories that you write. The characters that occupy those stories are the things that are the people that move them forward. So when we first start creating characters, it's really easy to fall into writing what we think a character should be in our head, or what we've seen countless times before in other stories in media and everywhere. So, this often results in kind of familiar or easy, recognizable stock characters, kind of like stock photography, right? Um, some examples might be the desperate housewife, the abusive alcoholic husband, the busy executive, or the troubled teen. And these are instantly familiar, but they are also very predictable. So, when you are watching movies on certain TV channels and the movie starts and you instantly know who everyone is, and you almost always can tell exactly what's probably going to happen over the course of that movie on that certain TV channel that's going to remain unnamed at this time. Um, those are stock characters. Those are those predictable, shallow, easy characters. Now, we want to try and avoid those, okay? We want to create characters that are more nuanced in our fiction. We want to aim to give our characters contradictory traits or maybe unexpected backgrounds, things that real people have in real life. So be wary of slipping into stereotypes or simply filling roles. So here are some examples you can see on the screen. Rather than having an executive who's cold and career obsessed, imagine an executive who struggles with shyness, loves adopting stray animals, and secretly writes poetry. This breaks the expected mold and helps your characters come alive. You'll see there's more examples here. You have a housewife who loves her family but struggles with needing solitude. You have the gay best friend who's terrible at fashion but brilliant at science. You have the alcoholic who wants to change but whose violence is maybe kind of unpredictable. Um, excuse me, you have a teen who gets pregnant, but actually finds unexpected support from somewhere you wouldn't expect, unexpected, you wouldn't expect it, like a teacher, or maybe there's something even more original that you can come up with. You want nuance, you don't want predictability in your characters. Now, why don't we want predictability? Because some people say, well, I'm comfortable with that. Sometimes I want to just sit back in a comfy story and know exactly that everything's going to turn out perfectly okay. And there are times when I want that too. There are times when I turn on that certain TV channel to watch those movies that turn out perfectly. Um, and we sometimes want that comfort, but the thing that happens when we fall into that is that the characters are flat and they're lifeless. They're not like real people, so we're not going to have the same effect from the story. They're um, kind of made from a ready use template, and you know who they are from first appearance. You can map out the whole arc, and then there's no surprise in the story. And sometimes surprise in fiction is the biggest, best payoff. So here are some examples. It's predictable to say that that you have a busy executive who realizes she needs love and instantly quits her job. What's unexpected is if the executive learns she loves her job even more after a relationship fails and she makes peace with being single. Now, you can argue which story is more satisfying, and that has to do with what goals you have when you approach the story, either as the writer or as the reader or as the watcher in the case of a movie. But most of the time, The payoff comes when a story provides surprise and authenticity. And that's when we're reading, especially, that's what we're looking for. Now, how can you become somebody who writes great characters? One of the best ways to become a writer of great characters is to observe the people around you. Observe human nature. Good writers are curious observers. The best characters come from noticing how people truly act and speak rather than from judging or scripting what you think they should say. So go out into the world and observe. Eavesdrop on conversations. Note down people's unusual habits. Be curious. Ask people questions. Carry a notebook or use your phone to remember things. Keep track of little interesting quirks or lines that you overhear when people are talking. Notice that people are often contradictory. Someone might do a kind thing, but they might be grumbling the whole time, or they may even joke when they're tired, or other details that don't always go along with each other. These details will help populate your fiction with living, unexpected characters. You can see here, I've given you on the screen a couple more examples. Let's look at these. So listen and jot down dialogue you overhear. I've mentioned that. You see here some examples of what people might say. Yeah, I'll get the report in eventually. He always leaves his socks everywhere, like a breadcrumb trail. You know, you might hear someone give an image in what they say that seems different or noticeable or somehow fresh, or maybe I always have it where I'm listening to people and I'm like, I would never say it that way. That is so interesting. And those are the types of things that you want to take note of. Another thing you can observe is gestures that people make, quirks in how they behave, and speech patterns. What this does when you observe other people and you spend your life as seeing yourself as a writer, seeing yourself as an observer, is you give yourself the opportunity to write beyond yourself. Um, when we're all about ourselves all the time, we end up writing about ourselves all the time. And when we write only out of ourselves, we're very narrow and we aren't truly giving a reflection of what the world is like. The reality is that the strongest characters you can write in a piece of fiction may be least like you, but you may have a tendency to write them most like you. So that's something as fiction writers that sometimes we have to fight. For example, if you're introverted, you have to fight to write about someone who is bold to the point of being reckless. That's outside of your experience and your way of being in the world. But it also can be an amazing adventure to reach outside your own experience and write a character like that. So think about some of the ways that you are and the ways that you can write about characters who are opposite of how you are. I have to caution you about autobiographical writing. And I have to tell you, this has been a struggle for me my whole life as a writer. My tendency has been to fictionalize my own experience because there's a lot of I've had a lot of good experiences, I've had a lot of interesting experiences, I've had a lot of varied experiences. There's a lot to write from there. You probably feel the same way in a lot of ways. That's how writers feel. But if you tend to fictionalize a character and it's really you, you have to remember to let them make mistakes you didn't make choices you would never make. You have to really reach to be sure you're fictionalizing because almost always the better fiction is out there beyond yourself. If it's not out there, you're basically writing a memoir and you're not writing fiction. Okay. So that is something that you always have to be thinking about when you're creating characters that are based on yourself or maybe based on people that you know. Another thing you have to watch out for when you're writing fiction is creating characters that reflect your agenda. If you're going into a story and you want to prove a point, you're that the point you want to prove is more important than just writing a great story, then you have to check yourself. You probably should be writing an essay. You probably should be writing nonfiction. What you're wanting to do with the writing that you're doing is not fiction. Okay? If you truly want to write good fiction, there's no agendas allowed. You can't go in and create characters to prove a point. In other words, this character will show my political views or show that my political views are correct. Um, Probably not a great way to go into writing fiction. You probably should be writing an essay instead. Here's an example. A story about an activist is far more interesting if they fail sometimes, contradict themselves, and grow in an unexpected way. Because remember, fiction is about nuance. Good fiction, good characters in our fiction are nuanced, real people. And I think this is really important right now, especially because current culture seems like it falls easily into two opposite camps. But if you go out in the world and start actually talking to people and actually observing how the world really works, you realize that there's nuance to everything and nothing falls easily into this category or that category. So, in order for fiction to truly reflect what life is actually like and to be satisfying for the reader, characters cannot be dichotomized in that way. Okay? Again, write real people, not mouthpieces for what people should or should not think. Okay? No agendas allowed in fiction. The power of the unexpected, it comes from this idea of observing people and reflecting real life. Readers are fascinated by characters who surprise them. I go to a story and I want to be surprised by something I didn't expect. When you're the writer, you need to challenge your assumptions and let your characters develop traits that didn't fit, that don't fit the first idea that you have of them. A lot of writers talk about how characters come to them. It's almost a mystical or spiritual experience, and where there were no people before, suddenly a writer's mind conjures up these people in almost this mystical way, and they're very real to the writer, and what they want to do is create those very real nuanced people for the reader to see on the page. So let your characters develop traits that don't fit the first idea you have of them. Here are some examples: a tough firefighter who's scared of deep water, a mean teacher who secretly volunteers at the animal shelter. Let your characters evolve as you write. They may surprise you. These aren't perfect examples. I think you could come up with much better examples. Let's see what you can do. Characters drive the story. That's the most important thing. At the end of the day, stories live or die on the strength of their characters. If the reader can't care about the people in your story, the plot's not going to matter much. Think of any great novel. It's the living, complex human characters that we remember. Without them, even the most exciting plot falls flat. So invest your energy in making your characters as real as possible. Here's two examples. Katniss Everdeen from the Hunger Games. She's not just brave, she's conflicted, she's self-doubting, she's motivated by love for her family, and she's in complicated situations constantly, and her life is always in danger. Here's another one. Holden Caulfield from The Catcher in the Rye. He's frustrating, contradictory, but unforgettable because he feels real. So that's characters. Now let's move on to dialogue. Dialogue is more than just words, okay? Words mean something, but what's happening around those words also creates the meaning of what's happening. Depending on who's saying the dialogue, how they're saying it, that makes a difference. So let's look at this example. Someone says, "You look fabulous." Okay, three words. You look fabulous. But what does it mean? Well, if it's coming from someone who's being genuine, a friend at a party smiling sincerely, then it's just a genuine, "You look fabulous." But what if it's coming from a friend of me who's rolling their eyes? That's sarcastic. It doesn't mean you look fabulous, really. What if it's coming from a colleague and there's a forced smile? Then we know it's probably jealous. So, dialogue isn't just the words the characters are saying, it's also the voice and the relationships of the people around. Now, quite often, what happens when people write dialogue is they'll just give a chunk and they'll show me this person says this, then this person says this, then this person says this, and it's just dialogue. Okay, so you can see it on this example at the top. Where are you going? I'm going out. When will you be back? And on the page, that's just straightforward, flat words. We don't understand the relationship between the people who are talking when we just see it like that. Now, in the second example, you can see the relationships of the characters and their movement and some descriptions, and you see the story world so much more completely. So instead, your dialogue should look like this second example. Sarah didn't look up as she slipped her shoes on by the door. "Late again?" Mark called from the kitchen, spoon tapping the edge of his mug. She tightened her laces. "Don't wait up." You can feel the tension in the pacing of the activity, the two characters, where they are in the room, how they're moving, what they're saying, the construction of what they're saying. Do you see how the world of the story is created? And really, that second example is not much longer than the first, but it gives us a completely different experience of the story that's actually happening. One quick note I want you to see in that second um, example that's so good. Notice that the dialogue tags are simple. We see Mark called. A lot of times, people will try to decorate. They try not to use the word said so much, is what I'm trying to say. Um, and so they decorate their fiction with all different ways to show that someone is saying something. But in reality, said works most of the time. Called works okay here too. Just avoid melodrama in your tags. Don't put in unnecessary adverbs. Just trust the dialogue in the scene to do the work. Here are some dialogue pitfalls. Too much talking. If I see a whole page of dialogue, especially if it's in the format of the first example on the previous screen, my brain just goes, "Blur, I don't want to watch, I don't want to read it," because I'm not going to be able to necessarily follow what's happening in the story. So too much talking is going to slow us down. Here's some examples of unnecessary dialogue. "Hello, how are you?" "I'm fine, thank you. How are you?" You know how that feels in real life? You know how that feels like a nothing burger of a conversation when you're in real life? That's how it feels in a story, too. So when you're using dialogue, make sure that it's there for a purpose. Better, uh, better dialogue is shown in this second example. It's cut straight to conflict or reveal character. Somehow, um, make your dialogue count. "You're late again." "Yeah, but at least I'm here." See how there's so much more happening in those two lines of dialogue than there are in the two in the earlier example? A common trap that people fall into is just having their characters talk for the sake of talking because they think, "Oh, I'm writing a story and they're human beings and human beings talk, so I need to have them talking. So here we are, let's have them talk." If there's no purpose to them talking, you don't need to have them talk, okay? Real Conversation in fiction is there for a purpose. It reveals tension, it moves the plot forward, or it explores something about the characters. Skip the greetings, skip the small talk, jump into what matters, like conflict, emotion, and change. Some final thoughts. Observe real people for inspiration. This is why I group character and dialogue together, because observing real people helps you with both. They go together. Let your characters surprise you. And if they surprise you, they're going to surprise your readers. Okay? Don't create characters that are predictable from beginning to end based on everything you've seen before. Make something new. Dialogue, let it reveal more than just what's said. Okay? Let it reveal more than just what's said. Most of all, have fun. Have fun inventing people who say things and do things in your story. It's so much fun to write fiction, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what you come up with this week. As always, let me know via the inbox if you have any questions or you want to chat about anything.